At 80, Marlon Brando reveals names of gay Hollywood actors he loved to death. Not in a tell-all interview, not on a glitzy red carpet, but through private, deeply personal recordings that wouldn't surface until years after his death. In the 2015 documentary, Listen to Me, Marlon, Brando's voice, raw and unfiltered, quietly confessed to secret same-sex relationships with some of Hollywood's most famous men. One name stood out immediately: Wally Cox, his lifelong best friend. Brando once mused, "If Wally were a woman, I would have married him, and we would have lived happily ever after." But Cox wasn't the only one. There were others, their names whispered through time. Men who shared stolen nights and dangerous passion in an era when homosexuality in Hollywood could kill a career overnight. These weren't fleeting flings. These were affairs full of complexity, buried deep beneath the surface of stardom in a world that demanded silence. Born in 1924 in Omaha, Nebraska, Brando's path from small-town boy to global icon was already the stuff of legend. But these revelations added a new layer to his mystique, one that challenged everything fans thought they knew. Before the Oscars, before the fame, before he changed acting forever, Marlon Brando was just a scared child, trapped in a house filled with chaos, cruelty, and silence. His father, Marlon Brando Sr., wasn't just a man, he was a storm, a violent, heavy-drinking salesman who crushed his son's spirit with every word. "You'll never amount to anything." Imagine hearing that day after day, as a boy trying to find his place in the world. And his mother, Dorothy Julia Pennebaker, once a dreamer on stage, became an alcoholic who vanished when Brando was only 4. Left behind in the ruins of what should have been a family, young Marlon was forced to grow up in emotional wreckage. Then came the woman he thought would save him, a maid named Army. At first she seemed like comfort, finally, someone stable. But her presence twisted into something dark. She began sleeping naked beside him, letting him touch her. In Listen to Me, Marlon, a haunting 2015 documentary built from Brando's own recordings, he admitted that it was in those moments he started to detach from the real world. This wasn't just trauma. It was the birth of a man who would spend his life chasing love through bodies, roles, and rebellion. He later called himself a sexual beast, not out of pride, but pain. His hunger for affection was endless, because inside there was a void that childhood had carved wide open. He had 2 sisters, Jocelyn, who found some light in acting, and Frances, who painted her way into a quieter life. But it was Marlon who carried the deepest scars. And those scars, dear viewers, would shape the legend and the tragedy of one of Hollywood's greatest icons. He didn't just break the rules, he rode straight through them on a motorcycle. Literally. Marlon Brando was expelled from Shattuck Military Academy in Faribault, Minnesota, for tearing through the school's hallways on his bike, a rebellious act that summed up the spirit he'd carry for the rest of his life. With no high school diploma and no clear path, Brando dug ditches in Illinois until something, or someone, pulled him toward a different destiny. His sister Jocelyn was already in New York, and it was there, at the New School for Social Research and later the Actors Studio, that Brando found his true calling. In New York, Brando encountered the revolutionary Stanislavski method, an acting approach that demanded real emotion and raw vulnerability. Taught by Russian master Konstantin Stanislavski and adapted by Stella Adler, it encouraged actors to tap into their own experiences, to breathe life into their roles. Brando didn't just learn the method, he embodied it, forever transforming American cinema and becoming the face of method acting. When Marlon Brando stormed the Broadway stage in 1947 as Stanley Kowalski in A Streetcar Named Desire, audiences weren't prepared for what hit them. He wasn't delivering lines, he was tearing his soul open. The raw, animalistic energy, the tortured desire, the violent charm. This wasn't theater as people knew it. It was Brando exorcising the trauma of his own past, channeling memories of his abusive father into every punch, glare, and scream. And when the play hit the big screen in 1951 under Elia Kazan's direction, paired with Vivien Leigh's haunting performance as Blanche DuBois, Brando wasn't just acting, he was redefining cinema. That iconic moment when he bellows "Stella" in the pouring rain, that wasn't just pain, it was Brando's soul echoing through the screen. The role earned him his first Oscar nomination, but more importantly, it birthed a new kind of Hollywood star. Gone were the days of suave, well-mannered charmers like Cary Grant. In their place stood Brando, gritty, conflicted, masculine in a way that felt dangerous. By 1953, in The Wild One, he sealed his reputation as the face of rebellion, straddling a motorcycle in a leather jacket and snapping, "What are you rebelling against?" His answer, "What ya got?" lit a cultural fuse that exploded across generations, influencing everyone from James Dean to Elvis Presley. Then came 1954's On the Waterfront, and Brando's performance as washed-up boxer Terry Malloy was nothing short of heartbreaking. "I could have been a contender," he tells his brother in one of the most legendary scenes in film history. That moment, that ache, earned him his first Best Actor Oscar, and to this day, watching it feels like peering into the bruised heart of Brando himself. Marlon Brando, a man forged by trauma, still managed to shine through the cracks with brilliance few could match. After electrifying audiences with raw emotion, he flipped the script in Guys and Dolls, 1955, dancing and singing alongside Frank Sinatra. Sure, critics panned his vocals as weak, but Brando proved he wasn't just a brooding dramatic force, he had range. In Sayonara, 1957, he played an American major who falls in love with a Japanese woman, a bold role at the time. Brando wasn't just acting, he was making a statement. The film earned him another Oscar nomination and allowed him to confront racial discrimination, a cause he cared deeply about. Then came The Young Lions, 1958, where he portrayed a German officer with unexpected depth. Sharing the screen with Dean Martin and Montgomery Clift, Brando humanized the enemy, something only he could make believable. In One-Eyed Jacks, 1961, a moody western originally meant for Stanley Kubrick, Brando took the reins and directed it himself. It was the only film he ever directed, a gritty tale of betrayal and revenge. Mutiny on the Bounty, 1962, followed, with Brando as Fletcher Christian. It was there he met his third wife, Tarita Terripaya. But the set was chaotic. Brando's inflated ego and wild demands led to massive budget overruns and industry backlash. Yet nothing could prepare the world for what came next. In 1972, he became a legend. As Don Vito Corleone in The Godfather, Brando didn't just play a role, he created one of the most iconic characters in film history. The performance earned him his second Oscar and immortalized him forever. He made $7 million in just 13 days, but turned down an Oscar. Why? To protest Hollywood's mistreatment of Native Americans. That was Marlon Brando, brilliant, rebellious, and never afraid to burn bridges for what he believed in. In 1972, he stunned audiences with Last Tango in Paris, a film now infamous for its controversial butter scene. Director Bernardo Bertolucci and Brando chose not to inform actress Maria Schneider beforehand, sparking lasting outrage and claims of on-set abuse. Why did he love like that? From my perspective, it was Brando's unconscious attempt to fix what was broken in his past, to build a family before it could fall apart. But instead, the drama followed. And the list of women didn't end there. Marilyn Monroe, whom he called just 2 days before her tragic death in 1962. Their romance? A haunting on-again, off-again connection. Monroe once whispered that Brando was the most sensitive man she had ever known. Then there was Marlene Dietrich, the sultry German screen legend who famously declared he was the most wonderful man, at least at night, in Berlin. Grace Kelly, the soon-to-be Princess of Monaco, had a brief but burning affair with him in Cannes. Ingrid Bergman, the iconic Swedish star of Casablanca, shared long, intimate nights with Brando in Europe during their film shoots. Edith Piaf, France's beloved voice of sorrow, once sang beside him in a smoky Paris bar. He stayed by her side through her battles with addiction. Then came Doris Duke, the richest woman of her time. They traveled on luxury yachts, and she even left him something in her will. But Rita Moreno, his most enduring lover, knew a different Brando. Their 8-year affair was, in her words, like a cocaine storm full of cheating, lies, and emotional wreckage. She nearly took her own life. Out of spite, she dated Elvis Presley. In her 2013 memoir, Moreno confessed that Brando once hit her. Jane Fonda, his co-star in The Chase, didn't sugarcoat anything. He was disappointing in bed. She said bluntly, "Dear viewers, let's pause here. These aren't just gossip headlines. They're emotional wreckage left in the wake of one man's chaotic charm." According to Susan L. Mizrucci's 2014 book, Brando's Smile, at least 22 women connected to Brando attempted or committed suicide. That's not seduction. That's a silent epidemic. Brando wasn't a monster. He was a wounded soul, shaped by trauma, unknowingly passing his pain to others. He once called Ursula Andress just to ask if they had ever slept together. He genuinely couldn't remember. Hollywood's golden god? Or a deeply haunted man? Maybe both. In Peter Mansa's explosive biography Brando, first published in 1994 and updated in 2025, one heartbreaking detail sticks out. Brando had at least 11 children, some born from secret affairs, like Petra Brando Corval, the daughter of his housemaid Cristina Ruiz. Many of these children were neglected, abandoned emotionally, and scarred for life. It's a detail that's both darkly humorous and deeply sad, how a man who could so powerfully portray human emotion often failed to show it in real life. Then comes the most mysterious layer of Brando's story. At age 80, in intimate audio recordings made before his death in 2004, Brando alluded to something long speculated, his bisexuality. This wasn't new territory for him. Back in 1976, in a candid interview with French journalist Gary Carey, he had boldly stated, "Homosexuality is so common, it's no longer news. Like many men, I've had homosexual experiences, and I'm not ashamed." But what was once hinted at in vague terms became startlingly specific years later. In 2018, legendary producer Quincy Jones made headlines when he declared that Brando would sleep with anything. According to Jones, Brando had affairs with cultural icons like James Baldwin, Richard Pryor, and Marvin Gaye. The claim was shocking, but it didn't stop there. Richard Pryor's widow, Jennifer Lee, later confirmed it, saying Pryor was always open with friends about his sexuality and never tried to hide his romantic connection to Brando. Imagine being so high, you'd make love to a radiator, then send it flowers. That's how wild the Hollywood parties were in the 1970s, according to comedian Richard Pryor, who once admitted he'd sleep with a pipe if it was the only thing around. And he wasn't joking. Quaaludes were flowing, cocaine was everywhere, and boundaries practically non-existent. Pryor and Brando crossed paths in this chaotic haze of desire and drugs, their affair lit by flickering neon and chemical euphoria. As Lee Pryor later put it, it was the 70s. Drugs were still good. But Brando's love life wasn't just wild, it was deeply political and passionate. One of his most influential lovers was James Baldwin, the brilliant black writer and civil rights icon. They met during the March on Washington in 1963, where Brando took the mic in support of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Baldwin, openly gay and unapologetically bold, shared long nights with Brando, filled with cigarettes, conversations on racism, and reflections on love in a broken America. And then there was Marvin Gaye, the voice of soul. Their connection, sparked during a recording session in LA, was electric. Gaye once called Brando, "the most charming man I know." According to Quincy Jones, they had secret meetings, wrapped in whispers and rhythm, perhaps inspiring Gaye's sensual lyrics about freedom, longing, and forbidden love. "I've only loved 3 men," Marlon Brando once confessed. Wally Cox, Christian Marwand, and Daniel Galen. The others were just overnight trains. Wally Cox, his childhood best friend with the awkward charm of a TV nerd, wasn't just a pal, he was Brando's greatest love. They met in New York in the 1940s when Cox was already making people laugh as Mr. Peepers. "Wally was the only one who could control my spirit," Brando said tenderly. When Cox died of a heart attack in 1973, Brando was shattered. He kept his ashes for decades, finally requesting that they be mixed with his own and scattered together in the haunting vastness of Death Valley in 2004. Then came the Frenchmen, Christian Marwand and Daniel Galen. They met at a smoky Beverly Hills party in the 1950s, and what followed was no casual affair, but a fiery ménage à trois. Young, beautiful, and fiercely discreet, the 3 lovers built a secret world no one dared intrude on. Brando was so moved by Marwand, he named his first son Christian in his honor. Years later, fate would loop back strangely. Daniel Galen's illegitimate daughter, Maria Schneider, co-starred with Brando in Last Tango in Paris, 1972, a film drenched in raw, unsettling intimacy. By then, Brando had loved, lost, and buried parts of his heart with each man. It was the scene that scarred her forever, the infamous butter scene in Last Tango in Paris. Maria Schneider wasn't warned. She cried real tears on set, feeling violated. Years later, she said, "I felt mentally raped." That moment haunted her life. She slipped into addiction and eventually died of cancer in 2011. Not every chapter in Marlon Brando's legacy was golden. As brilliant as he was on screen, he often echoed the pain of his own troubled childhood, hurting others in the process. And then there were the secret affairs. Burt Lancaster, the rugged action hero, according to the Gay Influence blog, their on-set tension during The Young Lions in 1958 flared into something deeper. Then there was Laurence Olivier, the Shakespearean icon. Quincy Jones once dropped a bombshell in 2018, saying Brando had a brief but passionate affair with Olivier while performing in London. And Monty Clift, the fragile, beautiful actor Brando couldn't take his eyes off. They met during an audition in New York. The chemistry turned possessive, romantic, and fiery. Clift had been with Elizabeth Taylor, but Brando swept him away. These were just some of the hidden storms swirling behind the Hollywood icon's smoldering gaze. He admired Cary Grant, mentored James Dean, and allegedly shared secret nights with Rock Hudson. Marlon Brando's private life was as dramatic as his films. According to the 1978 biography Monty Clift, Grant, famously bisexual and once cohabiting with Randolph Scott, would spend secret weekends in San Francisco. Brando, captivated by Grant since his Girl Friday, also moved in circles where desire and repression clashed beneath Hollywood's glitter. Rock Hudson, the silver screen's ultimate leading man and closeted icon, kept his sexuality hidden until his tragic death from AIDS in 1985. But a 2019 Diversity Rules magazine article claimed Brando and Hudson had liaisons at private Malibu parties, encounters known only to a select few. James Dean, Brando's young protege for Rebel Without a Cause, was also bisexual. Their relationship was tangled with passion and rivalry. Dean once admitted, "Brando was my idol and my lover." Director Nicholas Ray later confirmed the two spent long, intense nights together in New York. And Richard Pryor? He wasn't the only confirmed affair. In the smoky haze of Hollywood's wildest parties, secrets passed in whispers. One of them? That Brando didn't care who you were, man or woman. If he wanted you, you'd know. Billy D. Williams confirmed it in his explosive 2024 memoir, What Have We Here?, recounting the night Brando propositioned him at a house party. "He was smooth," Williams said, "but I told him no, politely." Years earlier, Quincy Jones had called Brando the most charming man he'd ever met, then added a warning. That charm masked a darker hunger. Even Richard Pryor's wife confirmed the affair rumors, while Pryor's daughter Rain, after initial denial, admitted her father had explored love without limits. And Brando didn't hide. In the brutal era of McCarthyism, when being gay could end your career, or worse, he still dared to say, "I've had homosexual experiences, and I'm not ashamed." Yet beneath the scandals lies something deeper. A man who refused to be boxed in, who turned trauma into defiance, who loved with abandon in a world that demanded silence. Brando wasn't just acting on screen, he was living a truth many still fear to speak. Behind the romance and rebellion of Marlon Brando was a storm of complexity, deception, and heartbreak. Not all his affairs were tender. Not all his actions were noble. Rita Moreno once attempted suicide after one of their breakups. And Maria Schneider, who starred alongside him in Last Tango in Paris, later revealed the infamous butter scene left her feeling, in her words, mentally raped. Brando, for all his charm, was a man of contradictions. In Man's the Contender, he's portrayed as unapologetically fluid, sleeping with both men and women. He embraced that freedom, but carried the loneliness of a world that wasn't ready to accept it. In a startling 1994 conversation with Michael Jackson, revealed in the 2019 Telephone Stories podcast, Brando allegedly told Jackson he suspected he had been with men. Jackson reportedly broke down in tears. Yet Brando didn't ridicule him. He encouraged him to face his truth. But Brando wasn't only about fame or forbidden love. In 1973, he refused the Oscar for The Godfather, sending Native American activist Sacheen Littlefeather in his place to protest Hollywood's mistreatment of indigenous people. Her speech was met with boos, but in 2022, the Academy issued a formal apology. And The Godfather itself, Brando's iconic role as Don Vito Corleone, with his puffed cheeks and whispered menace, was inspired by real-life mobster Frank Costello. That film, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, cemented Brando's legacy. Yet beyond the screen, he walked alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the 1963 March on Washington. He was more than a movie star. He was a battleground of brilliance, love, and rebellion. Brando didn't just mumble through scripts, he roared through history. In 1968, tears streaked down his face as he stood beside Coretta Scott King at Martin Luther King Jr.'s funeral, whispering a vow to keep the dream alive. That same year, he stood among Black Panthers at their funerals, urging peace and donating thousands of dollars to the civil rights movement. his voice echoing the influence of intimate relationships with figures like James Baldwin and Howard Gay. But Brando's fight for justice didn't stop with Black America. In 1975, he pitched a tent at Wounded Knee, standing with the American Indian movement, feeding protesters and amplifying their cause. Decades earlier, he'd purchased Tetiaroa Island in 1960, not for luxury, but to protect the environment. A dream now embodied by the Brando, a modern eco-resort. He backed Jewish rights, spoke out for Palestinians, supported Nelson Mandela during the anti-apartheid movement in 1994, and condemned the Iraq War in the 1990s. Why did he care so much? Because he understood pain. I fight for the oppressed because I know what that feels like. He once confessed in Listen to Me, Marlon. Abused as a child, haunted by loss, Brando turned personal trauma into global compassion. He didn't just act, he acted out of empathy. A vegetarian who once rescued stray dogs, Brando was a rebel with a cause, and his legacy wasn't only built on fame, but on fierce, fearless humanity. He was a Hollywood legend, but in his final years, Marlon Brando was a broken man. Behind the fame and fortune lay a string of tragedies that haunted him until his last breath. In 1990, his son Christian Brando shot and killed Doug Drollett, the boyfriend of his half-sister Cheyenne, claiming the man had abused her. Christian went to prison for 5 years. In court, Brando wept and whispered, "I have failed as a father." Cheyenne, already carrying deep emotional scars from childhood, would never recover. In 1995, she took her own life at her mother's home in Tahiti. Brando was devastated. According to Tarita's 2005 memoir, Cheyenne had once accused her father of abuse, a claim that deepened his torment. By then, Brando had fathered at least 11 children, some born from secret affairs. One child, Nina Priscilla, came from his relationship with housekeeper Christina Ruiz. He once admitted he couldn't even remember all their names. He retreated into solitude on his private paradise, Tetiaroa Island, far from the cameras, the scandals, and the ghosts of the past. In 2004, he died in Los Angeles from respiratory failure at age 80. As he had requested, his ashes were mixed with those of his lifelong friend Wally Cox, and scattered in the desolate beauty of Death Valley. In his final recording, Brando confessed, "I've searched but never found what I wanted, on screen or in life." His story was one of brilliance and despair, of unimaginable fame and profound emptiness. And now, 2 decades later, new revelations emerge. Peter Manso's 2025 update of Brando, the biography, unveils a man tormented by his identity. Brando, he writes, battled rage over feeling like a monster for being bisexual in a world that wouldn't accept it. In Marlon Brando, Hollywood rebel, Bert Carnes dives deep into Brando's cultural power. From his film legacy to his unexpected fashion influence. The 2005 biopic Waltzing with Brando, with Billy Zane channeling Brando's Godfather-era charisma, portrays him not as a brooding actor, but as an environmental visionary. Based on Bernard Judge's 2011 memoir, the film explores Brando's dream of transforming Tetiaroa into a scientific eco-sanctuary. Now, in 2025, that dream takes center stage again. The Torino Film Festival hosts an extended retrospective, technically for his 100th birthday in 2024, screening 24 of his most iconic films. Simultaneously, Imprint Films unveils Film Focus, Marlon Brando Volber 2, a box set including rare gems like The Fugitive Kind and the revealing documentary Marlon Brando in Paradise, a deep dive into his environmental crusade on the island he called his own. Ever wondered what Hollywood legends whispered behind closed doors? In his 2024 memoir, What Have We Here?, Billy D. Williams drops a bombshell. Marlon Brando once flirted with him at a house party. Yes, that Brando, the smooth-talking icon of The Godfather and A Streetcar Named Desire, wasn't just a heartthrob. He was unpredictable, complex, and endlessly fascinating. At the time of his death, Brando's estate was estimated at $26 million. But if he were alive in 2025, experts like Newsbreak suggest his net worth would soar into the hundreds of millions. Yet, all that wealth can't measure the depth of his story. From a personal lens, Brando's life plays like a modern Greek tragedy. Raw talent, born of deep trauma, spiraling into cycles of self-destruction, and yet, still inspiring. His message? Be unapologetically brave with yourself, no matter your age or the time you live in. For those of us who've witnessed the tides of cultural change, Brando is more than an actor. He's a mirror to our collective past. And while Hollywood today is more open, more expressive, the lessons Brando left behind are still burning bright.